Hey everyone, great to have you back. Thanks for tuning in today. We've got a fresh new story for you, so let's jump right in. I never thought my marriage to Alice would come to this. Not long ago, I believed we were solid, unshakable even. But now, our relationship felt like an old house with rotting walls, held together only by routine. Started with something small, something I wouldn't have thought twice about before. That evening, I suggested we spend time together. Just dinner, maybe some wine, reminiscing about the days when things were easier. A simple, harmless request. But Alice didn't even look up from her phone. "I don't have to spend every moment with you," she said, her tone flat, as if the idea of being close to me was nothing more than an obligation. "We're married, not glued together." The words hit harder than I expected. I sat there, staring at her, waiting for her to say something more. Maybe a joke to soften the blow, a smile to show she didn't really mean it like that. But nothing came. She just kept scrolling, her face illuminated by the glow of her screen. I swallowed back my irritation and tried again. "I just thought it'd be nice. Like we used to." "We don't really." "Mark, stop." She sighed, finally looking at me, but her expression was distant, detached. "I'm tired. Can we not do this right now?" And that was it. Conversation over. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened, but it was the first time I really heard it. It was the first time I let myself sit with the words, let them settle into the cracks that had been forming in our marriage for months, maybe even years. I didn't argue. I didn't tell her that marriage wasn't about just coexisting under the same roof, that it wasn't supposed to feel like two people walking separate paths, occasionally passing by each other in the kitchen. Instead, I nodded, stood up, and walked out onto the back porch. The air was cool, crisp. I leaned against the railing, looking out at the yard we had once talked about turning into something special. A garden, a place for future kids to play. But nothing ever came of those plans, just like so many other things. I stayed out there for a long time, long enough for the warmth of the house to feel like a distant memory. When I finally went back inside, Alice was already in bed, curled up under the blankets, fast asleep. That should have been a comfort, the sight of my wife peacefully sleeping. Instead, all I could think about was how easy it seemed for her, how effortless it was for her to close her eyes and drift away, as if nothing had happened, as if I wasn't standing there, wide awake, feeling the weight of a marriage slipping through my fingers. I climbed into bed beside her, careful not to disturb her. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time we had actually been happy. Really happy. Not just comfortable, not just existing in the same space, but actually connected. The silence stretched between us, heavier than ever. The next morning, Alice was already up by the time I walked into the kitchen. She was sipping coffee, her hair still damp from the shower, scrolling through her phone. I waited for her to look up, to say something, anything. But she didn't. "Morning," I said, grabbing a mug from the cabinet. "Morning," she murmured, still distracted. I sat down across from her, watching as she absently stirred her coffee. "About last night," she sighed, setting her phone down just long enough to rub her temple. "Mark, I really don't have the energy for this today. Can we not?" I let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Right? Of course. We can just keep pretending everything's fine. That always works." Her eyes flicked up to mine, and for a second, I thought I saw something there. Guilt, regret, something real. But it vanished just as quickly. "I don't know what you want from me," she said. That was the problem. I didn't know either. I just knew I wanted more than this. That day at work, I couldn't focus. Everything felt off, like a thread had been pulled loose, unraveling something I wasn't ready to face. The hours dragged by, my mind circling the same thoughts over and over again. By the time I got home, the house was dark. Alice's car was in the driveway, but she was nowhere to be seen. I found her in the bedroom, sprawled across the bed, earbuds in, watching something on her laptop. "Hey," I said, leaning against the doorway. She glanced at me, then back at her screen. "Hey, did you eat?" "Yeah." I swallowed the knot in my throat. You could have waited. I would have grabbed something on the way home. She shrugged, eyes still glued to the laptop. Didn't know when you'd be back. That was a lie. I got home at the same time every day. I didn't press it. What was the point? Instead, I walked back to the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sat alone at the dining table. The silence stretched around me, thick and suffocating. I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the messages app. There was no one to text, no one I wanted to talk to. I could have gone back to the bedroom, could have forced another conversation, another attempt to fix whatever was breaking between us. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed right where I was, drinking my beer in silence, listening to the sound of Alice's laughter drift from the bedroom. Laughter that wasn't meant for me. The days started blending together after that. Every morning, Alice would wake up before me, get dressed, drink her coffee while scrolling through her phone, and then leave for work without so much as a glance in my direction. I stopped trying to break the silence. What was the point? It was clear she had already checked out, and I was just the guy who happened to share the same space with her. At first, I thought maybe it was just a rough patch. Every couple goes through them, right? Maybe she was stressed. Maybe work had her on edge. Maybe something had happened that she wasn't ready to talk about yet. So I waited. I gave her space. I let her come to me when she was ready. But she never did. Instead, she became even more distant. She started coming home later, always with some excuse. I grabbed drinks with the team. A meeting ran late. I lost track of time at the gym. None of it made sense, not really. Alice wasn't the type to stay out late, and she had never been close with her coworkers before. I wanted to believe her, but something about the way she said it, the way she avoided eye contact, the way she always seemed slightly on edge, it all felt wrong. I tried not to think about it too much. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband who let his insecurities drive him crazy. But one night she slipped. It was a Thursday. I had gotten home at my usual time, and she was already gone. She hadn't mentioned any plans that morning, but at this point, I had stopped expecting her to. I made myself dinner, had a couple of beers, and settled on the couch, flipping mindlessly through TV channels. Around 11, I heard her car pull into the driveway. I didn't move. I just sat there waiting. She walked in a minute later, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She looked surprised to see me still awake. "Hey," she said, setting her purse down. "Hey," I replied, my voice even. She hesitated, then kicked off her shoes and started heading toward the bedroom. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she smelled, like a scent that wasn't hers, something faintly musky, almost like cologne. Maybe it was the way she seemed flustered, like she wasn't expecting to be questioned. "Where were you?" I asked. She turned around, raising an eyebrow. "What? Where were you?" I repeated. "I told you. Work ran late, and then I grabbed drinks with the team." "Which team?" She blinked. "What? You don't usually go out with coworkers," I said. "So who was there?" She hesitated, just for a second, but I caught it. "Just some people from my department," she said quickly. "I don't know, Mark. I wasn't keeping track. Do you need a list of names or something?" I didn't respond. I just watched her. She sighed, rolling her eyes. "Jesus, what is this? An interrogation? I had a long day. I went out for a bit, and now I just want to go to bed." I didn't say anything as she walked past me, disappearing into the bedroom. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't stupid. I had seen enough movies, heard enough stories from friends who had been in my position before. The late nights, the vague answers, the way she always seemed like she was somewhere else, mentally. I had ignored it for weeks, convincing myself that I was overthinking things. But now I wasn't so sure. The next day, I decided to test something. I sent her a text around 6, just a simple, "Hey, when do you think you'll be home?" She didn't respond for almost 2 hours. When she finally did, her answer was short. "Late. Don't wait up." That was it. No explanation, no details. Just late. So I waited. At 11, she still wasn't home. At midnight, nothing. By 1 a.m., I had stopped pretending I wasn't waiting up for her. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, staring at the clock. I considered calling, but something told me she wouldn't answer. Finally, at 1:37 a.m., I heard her car pull in. She walked in quietly, as if trying not to wake me. When she saw me sitting there, she froze for half a second before forcing a casual smile. "You're still up?" "Yeah," I said. "Wanted to see you." She shifted on her feet. "That's sweet. Where were you?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Mark, we already talked about this. I told you I was out with work people." "For 7 hours?" She blinked. "What? You left at 6. It's almost 2 in the morning. That's a long time for a couple of drinks." Her jaw tightened. "I don't know what you want me to say. We were having fun." I lost track of time. "Where'd you go?" She hesitated. "You don't remember?" I pressed. She exhaled sharply. "I do. We went to that bar on 8th Street. The one with the blue neon sign." "Lucky's?" "Yeah." I nodded slowly. "Huh." She crossed her arms. "What?" "I just didn't realize Lucky's was open this late. Pretty sure they close at midnight." Her face paled. Just a little. She recovered quickly, shaking her head. "Well, we went somewhere after that. Another place. I don't remember the name." "Right?" Her eyes narrowed. "Jesus, Mark. Are you tracking my movements now?" "What is this?" I stood up, setting my phone down. "I don't know, Alice. What is this?" For the first time in weeks, she looked nervous. But instead of answering, she turned away. "I'm going to bed," she muttered, walking past me. I watched her go, my stomach twisting. I had given her the benefit of the doubt for so long. I had told myself that maybe things would get better, that maybe I was imagining the distance between us. But now, standing there in the dimly lit living room, I knew the truth. She was hiding something, and I was finally ready to find out what it was. The next morning, Alice acted like nothing had happened. She walked into the kitchen wearing one of my old t-shirts, stretching as she poured herself a cup of coffee, her hair messy from sleep. I watched her from the table, waiting to see if she'd acknowledge last night. The lies, the tension, the way she practically ran to bed to avoid more questions. But she didn't. Instead, she took a sip of her coffee and scrolled through her phone, just like always. I waited a few minutes before finally speaking. "You sleep okay?" She barely looked up. "Yeah." I let the silence stretch between us, waiting to see if she'd fill it, if she'd offer anything else. Maybe a real explanation, maybe an apology. But nothing came. "Where were you last night?" I asked, my voice casual, like we hadn't already gone over this. She sighed, setting her phone down like I was annoying her. "I told you. Work stuff. Right?" I said. "At Lucky's. Then some other place you don't remember." Her expression hardened. "Are we really doing this again?" "I don't know, Alice. Are we?" She rolled her eyes and stood up, grabbing her mug and walking toward the sink. "I'm not playing this game, Mark. You're acting paranoid." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Yeah, maybe. Or maybe I just don't like being lied to." She froze for a second, just a second, but it was enough. I had my answer. She turned back around, arms crossed. "You seriously think I'm lying?" "I don't know. You tell me." She scoffed, shaking her head. "Unbelievable." Then she grabbed her purse, slung it over her shoulder, and left the house without another word. I sat there for a long time after she was gone, staring at the empty coffee mug she left behind. My hands tightened into fists, and for the first time, I let myself fully admit it. She was hiding something. And if she wasn't going to tell me, I'd find out myself. That night, I made my decision. Alice had been spending more and more time out of the house, giving me plenty of space to figure things out. I considered confronting her again, pushing harder for answers, but what good would that do? She'd just keep lying. So I needed proof. I started small. The next time she went out, I checked our shared bank account. If she was out with coworkers, maybe she'd paid for something, a round of drinks, an Uber, anything. But when I looked at the transactions, nothing was there. No bar tabs. No restaurant charges. Nothing. It didn't make sense. The next night, when she left, I decided to take it a step further. I waited 10 minutes after she was gone, grabbed my keys and followed her. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe I'd catch her at a restaurant with people she actually worked with, and I'd feel stupid for doubting her. Maybe she was telling the truth, and I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew better. She didn't go downtown. She didn't head toward the office. Instead, she drove to a quiet neighborhood on the other side of town, pulling up in front of a small house with a dark blue door. I parked a block away, watching as she sat in her car for a minute. Then, after glancing at her phone, she got out and walked up to the door. She didn't knock. She just walked in like she had been there before, like she belonged there. My heart pounded as I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing. I wanted to march up to that house and see for myself. I wanted to kick the door down and demand answers. But instead, I stayed right where I was, watching, waiting. Minutes passed. Then an hour. She didn't come back out. I forced myself to drive home, my stomach in knots. I didn't sleep that night. I barely even moved. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound of her car in the driveway. 2:14 a.m., I heard it. A minute later, she walked inside, as quiet as she could. She probably thought I was asleep. She tiptoed into the bathroom, the sound of the shower running a few moments later. I waited. When she finally crawled into bed beside me, I could hear her breathing, slow, controlled, like she was making sure not to wake me. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay still. She smelled different, not like her usual perfume, but something else, something unfamiliar. I lay there, my back to her, eyes wide open, and in that moment I knew. The next day I didn't say anything. I let her leave for work like normal. I kissed her on the cheek like normal. I smiled like normal. But nothing was normal anymore. That afternoon I made a call. A friend of mine, Derek, worked in private security. We weren't particularly close, but we had helped each other out in the past. When I told him what was going on, he didn't hesitate. "I'll look into it," he said. "You sure you want to do this?" I laughed bitterly. "I don't think I have a choice." That night, Alice came home earlier than usual. She walked in with takeout, setting it on the table like she was trying to play the role of a good wife. "I figured we could have dinner together," she said, smiling. I stared at her, searching for any sign of the woman I married, but all I saw was someone I didn't recognize. "Sure," I said, forcing a smile. "That sounds great." We sat across from each other, eating in silence. She scrolled through her phone between bites, occasionally glancing up at me with a forced casualness that made my skin crawl. "How was your day?" she asked. I took a sip of my drink. "Fine," she nodded, chewing slowly. "Work's been crazy lately. Just non-stop meetings." "Yeah," I said. "Must be exhausting." She shrugged. "It is. But, gotta do what you gotta do." I forced another smile. "Yeah, I guess so." She didn't realize I already knew. That night, as she slept beside me, my phone buzzed. It was Derek. "Got something for you. Call me when you can." I exhaled slowly, staring at the message, my fingers hovering over the screen. Then, without another word, I got out of bed, walked into the living room, and made the call. Derek picked up on the second ring. "You sitting down?" "Yeah," I said. He let out a breath. "All right, you're gonna want to hear this." I gripped my phone tightly, my pulse pounding in my ears as I paced the living room. Derek didn't speak right away, like he was trying to figure out the best way to break the news to me. "Mark," he finally said, his voice low. "It's exactly what you think it is." I stopped pacing. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. "Tell me," I said. He sighed. "I followed her tonight. She left work at 6 but didn't head home. Drove straight to that same house. Same routine. Sat in the car for a minute, checked her phone, then went inside. She stayed for over 3 hours." I swallowed hard. And she wasn't alone," Derek said. "A guy showed up about 20 minutes after she got there. I got pictures." My stomach twisted. Who is he? His name's Ryan, Derek said. I ran his plates, did a quick check. He works in her office. Not her direct team, but the same company. Single, no kids, about our age. Looks like he's been there for a couple of years. I let out a breath, trying to process it. You sure? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Yeah, Derek said. I got pictures of them together. Not just inside either. When he got there, she met him at the door. They stood on the porch for a minute, talking, laughing. She touched his arm. He touched her waist. Nothing over the top, but they weren't just co-workers catching up. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of it settle deep in my chest. You want me to keep digging? Derek asked. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, that I had enough. But another part of me, the part that refused to be blind anymore, needed more. Yeah, I said. Keep watching. I need to know how far this goes. Derek exhaled. All right, I'll keep you updated. I hung up and stood there in the dark living room. My mind a storm of anger, disbelief, and something else I couldn't quite place. I had suspected it for weeks, but hearing it confirmed, having actual proof, felt like a different kind of betrayal. I walked back to the bedroom, careful not to make a sound. Alice was fast asleep, curled up on her side, breathing steady. She looked peaceful, like she didn't have a care in the world. I stood there for a long time watching her, wondering how she could do this, how she could come home every night, sleep beside me, act like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't been in another man's arms just hours before. For the first time in our marriage, I felt like I didn't even know the person lying next to me. The next day, I played my part. I woke up, made coffee, went to work like everything was normal. Alice kissed me goodbye before she left, told me she'd be home late again. I smiled and told her to have a good day. And then I waited. Derek sent me another text around 7 p.m. She's there again. Ryan just showed up. Same as last night. I stared at the message, my hands tightening into fists. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was routine. I needed to see it for myself. I grabbed my keys and drove across town, parking a block away from the house. My heart was pounding as I got out of the car, my legs moving on autopilot. I stayed in the shadows, watching. Through the front window, I could see them sitting on the couch. She was leaning in close, laughing at something he said. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't pull away. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. I could storm in right now, knock on the door, demand answers, make a scene. But what would that do? She'd deny it, spin some excuse, try to talk her way out of it. No, I wasn't going to give her that chance. Instead, I pulled out my phone, snapped a few pictures, and walked away. That night, when she came home, I was already in bed. She slipped in beside me like she always did, her body warm under the covers. She sighed softly, rolling toward me, draping an arm over my chest. "Missed you today," she murmured. I stared at the ceiling, my body stiff beneath her touch. I wanted to throw her arm off. I wanted to tell her I knew everything. I wanted to see the look on her face when she realized she was caught. But I didn't. Not yet. "Missed you too," I said instead, my voice even. I let her believe she still had me, because soon she'd realize she didn't. The next morning, Derek sent me a folder of photos. Alice and Ryan sitting too close together. Alice opening the door for him, smiling like she used to smile at me. I stared at them for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and made another call. "Hey, it's Mark," I said. "I need a lawyer." The process started that afternoon. I met with a divorce attorney, laid everything out, showed him the pictures. He nodded, flipping through them without surprise. "You've got enough here," he said. "Are you looking for a clean split? Or do you want to make things difficult for her?" I thought about it. About the years we had spent together. The good times. The bad times. The way she had looked at me when we got married. The way she had looked at Ryan on that couch. I exhaled. "I just want to be done with it." "Then we'll make it quick," the lawyer said. By the time I got home, Alice was already there, sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone. "Hey," she said, looking up at me with a smile. How was your day? I looked at her, at the woman I had once thought I would spend my entire life with, the woman who was still lying to me, even now. I set my keys down, my expression unreadable. Good, I said, and for the first time in weeks I wasn't lying. The next few days were almost laughably normal. Alice kept up the act, smiling at me over breakfast, asking about my day, kissing me before she left for work. She had no idea that I knew everything, that I had already started the process of dismantling the life we had built together. And I played along. I responded to her texts. I let her rest her head on my shoulder when we sat on the couch. I even told her I loved her when she said it first. But there was a weight behind every word I spoke, every movement I made. It was all calculated, deliberate. I wasn't going to let her suspect a thing. Not yet. Derek kept watching. Every night, Alice found a new excuse to leave. Sometimes it was work, sometimes it was a girls' night, sometimes she just needed some space. And every night, I got another text confirming what I already knew. She's with him. Same place. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to feel the fire of betrayal burning inside me, pushing me toward confrontation. But instead, I felt nothing. Just cold, quiet detachment. I was done grieving. Now I was just waiting. The lawyer finalized the paperwork by the end of the week. I went over every detail, made sure there was nothing Alice could fight me on. No way for her to turn this into something ugly. I wanted it clean, precise, irrevocable. All that was left was serving her the papers. And I had a plan for that. Friday night, Alice came home later than usual. I was already sitting at the kitchen table when she walked in, my fingers tapping absently against my coffee mug. She looked surprised to see me awake. Hey, she said, setting her purse down. You're up late. I nodded. Couldn't sleep. She hesitated for a moment, then walked over, pressing a kiss to my temple. You should come to bed, she murmured. I smiled at her, small and unreadable. In a bit. She nodded and disappeared into the bedroom. I sat there for a long time, listening to the sound of her moving around, the soft creak of the mattress as she climbed into bed. I could hear her sigh, settling in like she had no worries in the world. She thought she had gotten away with it. She had no idea what was coming. The next day, I left for work as usual. Alice gave me a quick kiss goodbye, told me she'd be working late again. I nodded, pretending not to know exactly where she was going. Then I made my final call to Derek. Tonight's the night, I said. You want me there? I considered it, then shook my head. No, I'll handle it. I spent the day like a man preparing for war. I went home early, packed a bag with everything I wanted to take with me. Clothes, important documents, anything sentimental that was actually worth something. I left my wedding ring on the nightstand. Then I placed the envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was everything: divorce papers, pictures of her with Ryan, a letter detailing exactly how I found out. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't even going to give her the satisfaction of an argument. I was just going to let her walk in and find it. Let her read every single word. Let her see the evidence laid out in front of her. And then let her realize that I was gone. By the time she got home, I would be long gone. I took one last look around the house before I left. It didn't even feel like mine anymore. Maybe it hadn't for a long time. Then I walked out the door, got in my car, and drove away. I didn't answer my phone that night. The next morning, I finally checked my messages. There were 12 missed calls from Alice, 3 voicemails, a handful of texts, ranging from confusion to desperation. Mark, where are you? What is this? What the hell is going on? Please just call me. We can talk about this. Mark, don't do this. Just come home and talk to me. The last message came at 3:27 a.m. I screwed up. I know I did. But please don't throw everything away like this. I love you. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I deleted every message. She had already thrown it all away. I was just finishing what she started. The next few days were eerily quiet. No more texts, no more calls. Maybe she had finally accepted it, or maybe she was just too ashamed to keep begging. Either way, I didn't care. I had moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No ghosts of a broken marriage. No reminders of what I had lost. Just a fresh start. One evening, I stopped by a coffee shop after work. As I waited for my order, I glanced around, and then I saw her, Alice. She was sitting by the window, staring at her phone, looking exhausted. She didn't see me. For a brief moment, I considered going over, saying something, but what was there to say? She made her choices, and now she had to live with them. I took my coffee, walked past her without a second glance, and stepped outside. For the first time in a long time, I felt free.